Hey, hi! Welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the original podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner. I'm a critic, consultant, and programmer based in Toronto, and this is the other thing I do. My guest this week is Tasha Hubbard, whose documentaries include Nipo Wista Masawin, We Will Stand Up, Singing Back the Buffalo, and Birth of a Family, which is about a reunion of adult siblings separated as children in Canada's shameful 60s scoop, a plan that removed Indigenous children from their families and placed them with white foster parents in an attempt to smother Indigenous culture within a single generation. That project led Tasha to her first dramatic feature, Meadowlarks, a fictionalized story of four siblings, played by Michael Greyeyes, Carmen Moore, Alex Rice, and Michelle Thrush, who meet for the first time as adults in Banff and try to understand how to be a family. It premiered at TIFF earlier this fall, and it opens across Canada this Friday, November 28th. Tasha picked Winter's Bone, Debra Granik's 2010 Sundance smash that launched Jennifer Lawrence in a breakthrough performance as Ree Dolly, an Ozark teenager who's become the caregiver for her family since her father got embroiled in the local meth trade. But when he goes missing before a court date, their home is at risk of forfeiture, and Ree has to dive into the worst parts of that world to find him and secure her family's safety. Winner of the Grand Jury Prize at Sundance, Winter's Bone certified Lawrence as an incredible talent and got her first Oscar nomination, along with nods for Best Picture, Best Adapted Screenplay, and Best Supporting Actor for co-star John Hawkes. And 15 years later, Tasha still counts it as an inspiration. This is Someone Else's Movie.
Well, I started in documentary, and I grew up in Saskatchewan, mostly small towns. And at a time when as a young, teenager, what are your career paths? I mean, filmmaker it never made the list. There were the traditional sort of social worker, teacher, nurse, so I started out thinking I was going to be a teacher and quickly realized that probably wasn't for me. And I wanted to work in the arts. And I had artists on my mom's side, made their living as visual artists, my uncles. On my dad's side, singers, actors. I can't draw. I can't act. I can't sing. So I was like, okay, I guess I'll do arts admin. And then I met Métis filmmaker Gil Cardinal, who really put the idea of documentary filmmaking in front of me. And so many things coalesced in what I was interested in. I have a deep interest in history. I'm very situated in the prairies. And as someone who was adopted out as part of the 60s scoop, at that time in my life, I was just wanting to learn so much, and I had that, still have that curiosity, to learn. So I started working in documentary and made films, mixed that with academia. And, I would see people making drama, like moving into that scripted space, and sort of had this interest, but also, I didn't go to film school. I wasn't sure how to start. And when my son was 3, I was trying to finish my PhD, and I moved back to the small town where my grandparents lived to help take care of them and whatever, just be present with them, do writing. And so I didn't get to go to the theater, but I watched films all the time because I'm living in a small town of 300 people and don't really know people my age, and all my friends are senior citizens. But I watched a ton of movies, and I watched Winter's Bone, and I was just so struck by, the character of Ree, but also the specificity of place and the way in which the land was so present in that. And I think like it's the film that made me think I could maybe do this, because I'm, really grounded in where I'm from. I think about the land all the time. I am really drawn to like characters that have to overcome the situation they're in, and sometimes those challenges are insurmountable. And yeah, I was just wow. And I just watched and watched that film and started to write. And the project I wrote, I was learning what I was doing, but I
Sure.
think it's a good project and I'll revisit it. Like I'm hoping, in next year, that's on my list of what am I going to work on next. And it's revisiting that script. And I think, this film, Winter's Bone, is what gave me the courage to go, okay, you know, the kinds of stories I'm interested in, like these are films that I can make.
Right. So it wasn't just that it represented an environment, it was the narrative as well. It was like that sort of combination of factors.
Yeah.
I'm always fascinated by the genesis, by the thing that clicks people over into, relating to a production or a piece of art as something that is, it's not just accessible and suddenly personal, but it's like, oh, I could do that.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of patience in Winter's Bone, this sort of
Yeah.
ethnographic aspect of it, where we're just watching Ree move from place to place and see how things work.
With that incredible walk.
Yeah,
Like that walk is
like a
so
Terminator. She
memorable.
just
She's
powers
just
through.
so like dogged, like she's just, on her mission. And yeah, I think, I'm the oldest. I was the oldest in my family with a lot of responsibility that maybe came too soon.
Mm.
Um, and I so that, I really like the, just her being so focused on her goal, not necessarily for her own personal benefit, but on behalf of others. I think that really resonated for me. Because I see that in our community, like women who just have to overcome,
Mm.
to for our children's sake, grandchildren's sake. Like I think my docs, I've always, there's always been these women who are usually mothers, but have that same resoluteness that Ree had in the script. So yeah, it was just a film that really stayed with me. And I think this like a that it the scope of it goes deep instead of broad. I think I was
Mm.
really taken with that as well.
Yeah, it is the story of the community as much as it is the story of one person, but
Mhm.
because she's not exactly an outsider, right? Like you're
Mhm.
constantly seeing people offer her help, but it's not the kind of help she needs.
Mhm. Or it comes with
And
a price,
right, or
right?
it's something she knows is a
Yeah.
rigged game.
Hmm.
And watching this character who is still like, I know Jennifer Lawrence was 20 when or 19 when she shot it, but the kid's a child. Like Ree is a child. She has not finished anything
Hmm.
as a person. And those weird moments of a completely naive character who is wise beyond her years. Like it's a cliche, but she's still a kid. And Lawrence is such a good actor. She's like, even then, I remember the big flurry out of Sundance when the film played. And it's like this incredible unknown actor. Like she's on TV. She was a sitcom actor. She was completely in the system, which I find so fascinating because
Hmm.
it doesn't feel like the same person. Like that, obviously, that's what acting is. But her incredible ability to just be unglamorous, be unself-conscious. I've met her a couple of times, and the first time was for Silver Linings Playbook, and she was like joking about how she really has to learn to stop saying what's on her mind.
Hmm.
And then subsequently when Causeway played the festival, I was backstage because I was on the programming team then, and I was backstage with her as a backup intro. So I just got to spend a couple of minutes with her, and she's still very much her own person,
Hmm.
just 10 years older and impossibly glamorous because it was a red carpet world premiere. Uh, but the fact that she's able to, like, even now to revisit the film and see that performance, you absolutely see her entire future as an actor, but you also don't see Jennifer Lawrence at all. There is a
Hmm.
child on that screen, and she's trying not to show how scared she is and
Yeah.
turning it into anger, which is
Hmm.
it's such an incredible choice.
Hmm.
She is not coping at all with what's happening, but she puts that into a performance of competence.
Mhm.
And I know that's on the page. I know that's all part of it, but it tells us so much about how alone she feels, even if she isn't. And instantly sets us, it aligns us with her immediately against the entire community because
Mhm.
we're suspicious even if she's not. Like the scene with the recruiter where someone shows her genuine kindness and sensitivity and all she can do is say, this isn't what I want, and
Mm.
I can't handle this right now. You're blocking my path, and he's keeping her from making a terrible mistake.
Yeah, it's because, you know, it's that the inability because of the the circumstances that she's grown up in, you know, there's never anyone she can trust,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and even her one friend who, you know, and I mean, in the end is able to come through for her, but is limited, even though she wants to, right? There's the limitations on her own agency, and you know, there's it's different when you're married, and it's like, yeah,
Right.
you know, for them it is for sure. But yeah, no, her, I mean, her performance, it's so like, I don't know, it's to see that complete openness, you know, it's really something. It was really, and I remember just being struck by it as well, that you know the range of like the defiance in, and there's that, you know, one of my favorite scenes is when she calls the sheriff on his lie that he wasn't afraid, and she's just like, you know, unafraid to push back, but out of necessity, right?
Yeah,
And you're
she's
right, like
going down swinging, right? Like,
there's still that undercurrent, you're right, of like a fear of desperation of you know all of these things, and you know, I think that there's something around the character who has to grow up too fast and still holds on to those moments of, you know, the scene with her mom is a great example, right? Like just the pleading in her voice to please be the adult because this is too much for me. Like that's the acknowledgement, like I'm doing my best here, but it's too much. And, you know, of course, you know, the mother can't cope and can't stand up, and she is on her own. And what we were saying earlier about like the insider, it that I think that's what's really fascinating is, you know, she is an insider and she knows the codes. I'm fascinated by the notion of codes in
mm,
this, like the, you know, the code that everyone lives by and that she fully understands and knows she's having to push the boundaries of that code in order to protect her, you know, her siblings and everything. Um, and yet she's apart still, right? Like when Teardrop offers her the meth, you know, it's like she's like, no, that's not my path. You know,
yeah.
she's because of who she is and her blood, she's a part of it, but she's also not a part of it. So, you know, I think there's that always that interesting insider outsider, you know, element to things that is endlessly interesting and watchable.
Yeah. Well, and it's actor gold too, because
Mhm.
when an actor is embodying the POV character for the audience,
Mhm.
we get that brief moral moment. Well, of course, I would never do meth either. I'm better than that. And then you just see the world that she's in. It's like, oh no, that's an incredible level of strength that this character doesn't know she has, that she's been able to just not give in and not be part of it because it's simply the way things are.
Yeah, it's so normalized, and I think that's also fascinating that, you know, things that the way that the family, you know, and I mean, it's you know, obviously a film about poverty and the circumstances that people are in and what are the opportunities and outlets, and you know, there's, I think the film does such an interesting like take on that where it's just matter of fact. It is survival. It isn't a moral. It doesn't give that moral judgment so much. You know, like, oh my goodness, they. It's like, what are the other options? And you know, no, I'm not condoning it, but it's like you can see that it is um, because there aren't other options. That's what's there, and how they survive. And she's fully aware of it. And that's and I think that, again, it's that mix of like worldliness on some level where she understands the world she's in. She understands what her dad does. She understands what her family does, you know, but you're right, there's still also that like, um, yeah, just if she can't have her childhood, wanting to protect that of her siblings,
Yeah.
that's really, I think really compelling. And yet there's all these moments where she's like, they can't just be kids. They got to be kids who are also learning how to survive. Like, this is what you need to know, and it's just so peppered in these little moments throughout that I thought were really beautiful. Like, she's, and it's almost like there's a sense of I might, and I think there's part of it is, does she take the military in her way out? In it, so there is it that she's like, maybe I'm not going to be here one day. But I think there's also this sense of, this is a dangerous world that I live in here. Violence is possible.
Mhm.
This is also, I want to make sure these kids know how to survive if something happens to me. Like
Yeah.
that was just this interesting, like, undercurrent that I find really fascinating.
It's the way almost everything in the film has at least two or three layers of meaning, right? Like there's the immediate moment, there's the confrontation or the solution that's happening in front of us, and then there's all the history that every new piece of information unlocks and sort of
Mhm.
recalibrates. Like we're always on Ree's side, and there's never any question that she is a good person, like or like the hero of the story in structural terms.
Mhm.
But her loyalties are constantly being questioned, and she has like it the scene with the bondsman where she says, "Oh yeah, my father's got to be dead because otherwise he'd have shown up." She does it with such a clip, like she's angry at this guy for intruding on her space. She's protecting the home, she's protecting her family, but she's also maybe sort of admitting that to herself for the first time, that she won't see her father again. And there are ways that that could be more actorly or more dramatic, right? Like the lighting could be different. There could be just a lower angle on her face as she has this revelation, and she just spits it out like a weapon.
Mhm.
And that's like, I remember seeing that the first time, and in a like big screen press screening, 10 a.m. in the morning, like 12 people in the room, and just going, "Oh no, like this is plot. This is actually a level of storytelling." And like,
Mhm.
Debra Granik just came out of, it felt like she came out of nowhere. That's not fair. She'd been working for a while, but this was like such a such a natural muscular piece of storytelling.
Mhm. That's
uh,
disciplined, because
mm-hmm.
you can see the spots where a different director would have made different choices,
Yeah.
and she stays very disciplined throughout, which 100% pays off. When you get to the scene out on the water, it's like everything has led to this. And um I think it is what it is. Its power is that the Granik just doesn't layer too much other on it, because as you say, the story has so much depth and every scene has so much depth that you just, when you pare it all down, and you don't need, like, what I have an issue with music sometimes. I feel like, uh and my son is the same way. I remember what the heck did we watch? He would have been about 7 or 8, and this was a very heavy scored film. And he turned to me, and he looked, and he goes, and he just had this look of consternation. I'm like, what's wrong? He's like, this music is making me feel sad, but I'm not sad. I'm not sad, but it's making me feel sad, and I don't like it. And I'm like, right? I'm the same. Like, I don't want to be, I want to feel what is authentic and what's coming from the story and the performance. And sure, music can help with that, but I think sometimes it gets overused. And I find what's so fascinating about this film is, there's almost times where I would think, oh, because I rewatched it for this, and I was like, another filmmaker would have put music here, another filmmaker would have put music here, and she doesn't, right? It's just the sound of the space and or that little bit of drone that comes in that's just so foreboding. It's like, ooh, like if you pare down and then you put it back a little, it has such an impact.
Yeah. We're hearing, I think, like we're hearing the music in the back of her neck, like the feelings
Yeah.
that she's having, and it's so spare.
Yeah. Or the music or the sounds around, like the little bells. Like I always found that
Yes.
that moment was just like, oh, you know, the wind in the trees that have no leaves. Like there's something about the different sounds of wind that, you know, again, as someone grew up in southern Saskatchewan,
Sure. Yeah.
the wind has a different, it has different notes. And you really could tell that this was not a parachute project. They didn't just show up and film. They were here, they spent time, they understood her, she understood this place. And yeah, no, I was in new awe of that, like the yeah, the trust in the performance and the space and the story to not have to layer too much on. It was really great.
Hey, it's Norm interrupting my own show to bring you up to speed on Shiny Things, my newsletter about physical media, culture, and the odd streaming project. Last week, I wrote about the new releases of Universal Language, Splitsville, Together, Red Sonja, and Him, as well as Criterion's knockout restoration of Howard Hughes' Hell's Angels and the Shout Selects 4K release of Oliver Stone's Snowden. Sign up for a 14-day free trial at shiny-things.ghost.io or find a link at the Semcast Blue Sky account. You like reading about movies? I like writing about them. Come check it out. When the movie came out, there was some pushback about like the white trash depiction, the idea that someone had dared to make a film about poverty, impoverished people, and drug dealers being intertwined, and how there was no other way past it. And it was this weird. It was like, I guess Obama had been president for a full year and a half by then, and there was this kind of schism in the right where they were trying to figure out how to attack American creativity. Couldn't, just because they didn't have a guy in office, they couldn't figure out a good hook. And so anything that, and now of course looking back, it's like, oh yeah, it's white supremacists reacting to an idea that white people could be flawed. But in the context of Granik's larger filmography, like Down to the Bone is sort of about loneliness and isolation, although not in a rural situation. And then Leave No Trace is about someone who just is trying to disappear into the forest, literally vanish into the wilderness. This feels like it's saying something about like human behavior as primal and animalistic, almost. Like when you were talking about the lack of a score in the wilderness sequences, or just like even just the mountain, the sticks, right? Whatever it is that they're in, when Rhea is alone, she feels like a prey animal half the time. And the last time I revisited it, I realized like if this was an action movie rather than a psychological thriller or just a straight up character study, which I think is really what it is. Like all of Granik's films, she'll play with genre, but she's not interested in satisfying those beats. The only reason there's a mystery is to give Rhea a quest. If this was a genre film, it would be like, it's Bambi. It's the story of someone who has to be tough, and gets advice, but doesn't fully comprehend the ramifications of everyone else's actions, and only in the end kind of claims her place at the top of the food chain, even though Bambi doesn't really do that. So it's a bad example. But the use of Lawrence as someone who looks like, for all the hard scrabbling Rhee does in the film, and it's not that she's not convincing as an actor, but she looks like she still has a heart. Right? Like she's got the baby fat on her cheeks, and she still looks like a kid.
But I think that's what I think is so interesting is, I mean, being an Indigenous filmmaker, sadly, I think as Indigenous filmmakers, we're really experts in Indigenous stereotypes, right? And
Sure.
how a lot of us, especially those who are around my age, I mean, there was unchecked stereotypes in film everywhere. Bugs Bunny to to Westerns, right? It
Sure.
was everywhere.
Yeah, Neil Diamond made the whole movie about it, and that was 10 years ago.
There you go. And it still, keeps being a subject.
Mhm.
So, I think on some level, you know, this is also a pushback against that stereotype, and that, you know, it's what I find really interesting is, yeah, it's a violent place and there's these codes and, the drug trade and all of that. And at the same time, there's still family. There's still this, like, I don't know if, like, I think Ree is young, and you do wonder what is her trajectory, after the, I'm
Oh
always
yeah.
left with that. And but I think that there's this push to, I don't know, to still, like, there's not, they're not inhumane. There's still human beings who are in a complex situation. I think it's the commentary of who is worthy of having needs met and who is not, and I think this is an area where in the larger consciousness stereotype, they're not worthy of having, you know, what they need, their needs met, and so they survive despite that, you know. And so I think it, I was thinking about that a lot around the stereotype of the hillbilly, right?
Mhm.
And how they've been depicted in other films, you know,
Yeah.
Deliverance or any other example. And it felt that, and I think this comes from her, probably Granik's documentary background, of all of the time that she spent there to earn the access she needed to, you know, cast from the community. That doesn't happen overnight. That doesn't happen if they don't. And these people are people that don't trust well. So for her to have all that, and I think, it's the women I'm fascinated by, like, uh, Marab Moab, I forget her name, Marab,
Oh, Marab, yeah.
yeah, yeah, like, tough, scary, not without heart. Like, she, it's like she doesn't want anything bad to happen to Ree. You know, there's a code she has to live by, given who she's married to,
Yep.
what she's navigating. And, I love that scene when Ree first shows up and she's like, "Do you know what you're doing here?" And it's not without care. There's, like, there's this sense of, like, I don't want anything bad to happen to you, and you need to remember the code or something will, and there's nothing I can do. There'll be nothing I can do about it. But then she does. She intervenes, right? And it's like this, in a weird way, by beating up Ree, but then it's, the other option was they'd kill her.
Oh yeah, no, it's a de-escalation movie.
That's
Easy,
it's
totally.
exactly. And then, the men are just getting things worse. And so, she shows up and it's like her and her sisters are gonna fix this because, you know, again, it's like there's a care there. There's a underlying care, which, rough, violent, raw, all of those things, but it's still there. And I think, yeah, it's just, um seeing the moments that people find their joy, and moments of kids being able to hold on to some innocence, and, you know in a rough existence. And I think that pushes against the simpleton stereotype that often comes from the, regions like that. So
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, some of these characters are portrayed as, obviously they're violent and they're hyper protective, but they're also, like, as with Marab, the emotional intelligence, right? To not only save Ree, but do it by playing into a sort of misogynistic impression of what girls are for and what women are for in front of the men.
Mhm.
I mean, it's great writing, but it's also just so perfectly built into Dale Dickey, who, like she's a, a remarkable actor. And 15 years later, I'm so glad that you can now say, oh, a Dale Dickey role, and everybody understands immediately what kind of part that
Mm,
is
mm,
without stereotyping her. Like she just is that, she's able to do that thing,
yeah.
that shell of hardness with some kind of heartbeat underneath it.
Mm,
Um, but the way we are introduced to her, yeah, we get to see her thinking even when Reed doesn't. Like that's the
mm,
perspective of the movie that I find so fascinating. We are ahead of her for so much of it,
mhm.
but it never spoils the plot or the pacing. We're just allowed to watch this movie as adults, right, and see the things that Reed doesn't see.
And and yet I find 100%, and I would just add that there's for me an admiration of even when she starts to realize, like, for my own self-preservation, that I should not keep following,
Mm-hmm.
but the stakes are so high that she forgoes self-preservation for the risk, takes the risk for, again, not for herself, but for her mom and her siblings. Yeah, there's just something really, I don't know what the word is, striking, I think, around a character that who, yeah, goes against their own self-interest, you know, for others.
Yeah.
And I think as I'll just say, like, as a indigenous woman who's the oldest, who had to, put things aside for the benefit of others. Sometimes that's what has to happen in these situations, and I think that's what I think partly why I was so drawn to it is like, yeah, sometimes you just gotta be defiant in the face of being told no, because there's too much at stake to just worry about yourself as an individual.
Did you? I mean, we haven't even mentioned John Hawkes as Uncle Teardrop, who is like her almost most committed protector, even though he's
Mm.
also almost
Flawed,
incapable of, right? Like,
flawed as a character. It's like, oh.
yeah. Did you have someone like that for you in those decisions? I mean, is that
No, I
yeah.
don't like I think, I think different upbringing, different all of that. It's just I think it's the quality of, you know, I find that really interesting when a character stops putting themselves first.
Yeah.
And
I mean, it's a film noir trope, if anything, right? Like
yeah,
it is
yeah.
the detective pushing forward against all.
Against it, and I love mysteries. That's the other thing. I really do. I love every mystery, and I watch them and read them voraciously. And I don't care. Like I read them with, like, I don't try and figure it out. I just let it take me on this journey, and then I love the surprise. Like, oh, I didn't.
Yeah.
And so different kind of mystery in this film, obviously, but you know, you at some point it's like, at some point you realize, okay, yeah, he's not just gone. He's actually dead, and then but then it's like, then what? Then what can she do to solve this, right?
Yeah.
And her, I think I really also appreciate the scenes of her with the two different law enforcement, or representations of law, like
Mhm.
law and order, um and capitalism too, right? And the slipperiness of that, who you because it wasn't until I'd watched it maybe the second or third time that I realized it was the cop who had given up her dad to the Miltons. And
Yeah.
I didn't catch it the first time I watched it. And the second time I was like, oh, this guy, And so it just made that scene where she's calls him on his cowardice so much more satisfying, because it's like she knows she is the better person and he knows she's the better person. And yeah, it's really interesting. But I also found it, her the bail bondsman to be on the other end of the spectrum, where he's in the system, this is his role, he fully understands where the milieu in which he's working, and
Mhm.
and yet still has to do his job and can't help but admire her, and has some concern and for her and admiration at the end, right? And I think that's an interesting, not that she's looking for it from him, which I think is what makes it even more interesting. She's not needing the validation from him, but he's going to offer it anyway.
Yeah. And that felt like the closest commentary on, like how the quote unquote upper class. I mean, he's not. He's bail bondsmen by definition. They're kind of bottom feeders, and the movie version of that is, everybody thinks about De Niro in Midnight Run, like scrabbling guys who'll lie and cheat and do whatever it takes to bring their guy in. But it's a really interesting, dramatic choice that he gets the one moment to say, "You've done a good thing. Like you're better than you think you are," and have her not know what to do with it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because he's not from her world, he still represents a problem that she had to deal with. And yeah, he's giving her some money and that will help, but he's still part of the bigger problem. And
Yeah.
like, it's almost in that moment where you can watch Ree wrestle with her future. Like, you could be part of his world. She could still go, like, she could pass, right? Like, she could get out and clean up and go to school and learn a thing, but she won't because she wants to protect her family. And that's ingrained in her more deeply, as you were saying, than her need to protect herself. Mm-hmm. Not that she's doomed if she stays, but I don't know that she'll ever be like happy.
Yeah, I think that there is that, and it's so fascinating how the film starts. I mean, it starts with the kids playing and the work and the home and the school, and she makes her siblings go to school, right? Like there's this sense of like, I had to drop out. You're not going to, you're going to learn, you're going to know how to spell. Like there's this sense of like, she knows, I think even then, it's unlikely I'm gonna ever really get out or have a different path, but maybe these kids will, right? There's just like, why else put the effort in? And then you just see the wistfulness, right? Like, and that was the moment for me where I remember watching Jennifer Lawrence's performance and the wistfulness in her face when she's watching her friends and the drill and all of that. And it was like, oh, she wants more than what she has, but it was just so transparent and still, but not overdone. Like it just landed exactly right. And I thought that was so interesting. Um, and I'll just say, there's so many moments, with John Hawkes, but the scene of how the way his physicality shifts when the bondsman comes to give the money.
Yeah.
And he just literally melts and gives space. Because I think it signals the shift in how he sees Ree. Right? Like
that's interesting.
She's earned respect and you know what I mean? Like she is the head of the family, able to engage with this, bail bondsman that represents all the things. And Teardrop is like, it's like like it's just that body language of, I this is I'm not part of this right now, and she'll handle it.
I get that. I like, my read on it was that he's just putting literal physical space between himself and this guy just in case.
Yeah.
Like in case he needs to run or in case he needs to run at him. He doesn't want to be within swinging range. But yeah, that makes so much more sense that he's just reading the room and
yeah. Because you never see him back down on anything. Like
true.
It's so fascinating that he he didn't back down with the cop. He didn't who's got a gun. Like, there's that's why I read it differently. I was like, oh, that is his show of respect to Ree, that he, she will handle this. And he's just letting her do that. Yeah. But yeah, what a performance. I recently watched the True Detective, and
oh yeah.
and I didn't recognize him I watched it and you watched it and then I'm always like, okay, who's who and looking up the cat. And I was like, oh my God, I didn't even, he just melts into any role. Yeah, he's such a great actor.
And he is absolutely perfect for that guy. Someone who can just convince himself of the most unbelievable thing and also somehow be a terrible cop. Like just all the other things playing together, all of his sort of shortcomings as a person just piled onto each other. And Hawks can play. I mean, there's a scene where he just loses his temper and thrashes his kid, and somehow he makes it vulnerable on him. Like his character is the one who knows, even as it's happening, he knows he shouldn't be doing it, but he can't stop himself. And you can see it in his eyes for that split second.
Mm.
He's just so good at, I mean, even when he was on Deadwood,
Mm.
um,
I never saw that.
oh, it's,
I've
oh,
always, of course, heard lots of amazing things, but I never saw it.
yeah, you should watch Deadwood. It unlocks so many casting choices for the subsequent 20 years. I mean, Hawks and Garrett Dillahunt, who plays the sheriff, are both in it.
Mm.
Dillahunt's plays two characters, weirdly enough. They liked him so much, they killed him in the first season and they brought him back as somebody else.
Yeah, I'm always interested when shows do that.
His character, Sol Star, is there as a balancing act to Timothy Olyphant, who plays a sociopath who's found purpose as the town sheriff.
Mm.
And seeing him in Winter's Bone, if you have seen Deadwood, is so jarring because I think it was the first
I
time he
bet.
was sort of cast against that type.
Yeah. Which, so my first job in film was actually as casting. I assisted the main casting director, and then I ended up working in doing background casting for a TV series, and then worked as a casting director for a good 6 years, I think, 7 years. And then, I haven't done it in years, but always pay attention to casting, and I'm always really fascinated by those surprising choices, of the instincts of directors to go, this person it might not be what people think of, as a possibility, but they see something of what they're capable of. And I think that's the case for both. Like I think I read somewhere that Deborah Granik thought Jennifer Lawrence was, or they thought maybe she was too pretty, and then she like didn't wash her hair for a week and walked in and
Right.
pulled it off, and um but I think with John, I think that is always so fascinating when somebody doesn't choose the expected, or pushes into a surprising choice, and then when it pays off, like it's so satisfying.
This is where I get to pivot into your work because we have that in the way you use Michael Grey Eyes
Mhm.
in Meadowlarks. He's playing someone who is kind of experiencing his own vulnerability in real time, and I've never seen him do that before. And it's like I know him, I know he can do that, but no one's given him the shot. And the context that you provide for that performance and for everybody else's, but I mean, his was the one where like, that guy is going through some stuff and doesn't know it, and we get to watch him find out, and it's such a striking turn for him. And I mean, given that you were adapting this from a documentary that you made, and effectively they're playing versions of real people, how much room do you give an actor to find that and create someone who exists on their own in the movie as opposed to just doing an impression of someone?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely, I think there's similarities in the fictional characters from the characters in the doc, but only in the sense of a lot of people who have gone through that experience carry
Mm.
similar elements, but we definitely started over in who these characters were. Um, what stayed was I think what happens for a lot of people is then with needs not being met, you kind of reach a certain point, and then that's where you stay, even through adulthood, right? And that's what and the character of Anthony is based on people I've known over the years, um, and that, you know, so I always thought of him, it's like his needs aren't met, he's just trying to survive, and then marries the first person who shows him any kind of care, and then lets himself be cared for, but that can stultify growth, right? And that's kind of where, when we talk about the character with Michael, I'm like, you never really progressed past a certain emotional age. And so, he really relished that, you know, I'm like, you arrive a boy and you leave a man, right? So,
Yeah.
so let's calibrate that. But Michael had so many thoughts and ideas. And, I will say I had no preconceptions of cast for the other roles. I was like, so, I knew who the characters were, and I was just excited to see what actors brought in the auditions, but in the meetings. But pretty early on, Emil, Cher, and I had Michael in mind for that role. And it was exactly that. I'm like, I know he has the range to bring this element of vulnerability without taking it too far, because there's a balancing that act that has to happen. Um, and I was so glad that he liked the script and agreed to do it, because I was like, I don't know who else could do that. There's some great actors out there, but there's something about that in the psychology of it that just Michael, I could see it. And part of it's because we met, like he was one of the leads on the first show I ever worked on, and we've known each other since then. And but yeah, sometimes it's there. He talks about it, that because of how he looks, that's how you tend to get cast, right?
Yep,
And
sure.
the other thing I said to him is, your character doesn't know he's handsome. He never got told that he's good looking. He doesn't actually realize that he's handsome, and he moves through the world not understanding that he's attractive at all. And, do with that what you will. So he kind of, you can see the way Michael transforms his physicality to not take up space, to like the
Yeah.
tentativeness.
Yeah, his head sort of low on his shoulders sometimes, and even when he goes out running, he's very confident in his movements, but he doesn't want to get in anybody's way. Like, he's really considerate.
Mhm.
It's and the vulnerability too. Like, I've seen him play vulnerable, and he just has this massive presence that, yeah, it's not in Meadowlarks. He's just not playing it. After something like 40 Acres, where he's, like this dynamic physical performer and funny, which nobody lets him do at the same time. Until then, here he is, like, he's apologizing for stuff all the time, and he's not he's not naive. He's a full grown man who's living in the world, but it's exactly that. He hasn't finished
Mhm.
growing up. Contrasted to somebody like Carmen Moore, who is playing something like it's a version of a performance that is familiar. I've seen her do things like this before, because she does have that like steel rod in her spine that she can just turn off and on.
Mhm.
But again, to stop in the middle of all of it and just, like, you have these long, long scenes of people just looking at each other and listening, which could be risky, but
You,
especially around a quartet of characters who, although they're blood, they don't know each other, like,
Mhm.
other than in the abstract. They've maybe seen pictures or emails or phone calls, right? But this is the first time they've all been together. And
Mhm.
to let us feel it as an audience is
Mhm.
just, it's a wonderful thing to be able to do with cinema, to just put people in, somebody else's life for a couple of hours. But with this movie, what we're dealing with as an audience is, and this, I promise listeners, this is not a spoiler, we're learning their history with them, and like just sort of feeling the connections form. And I thought it was magical that doesn't happen in movies very often, where we trust the film and the film trusts us right back.
Well, thank you.
Of course.
I'm glad we had the time to really refine the script, to get to that where you have that balance, because you can't stay in that all the time. Like, and then, in the production design, we're like, okay, what does this table look like? Like, we're bringing them in, but also the physicality of the house, like where are these things going to happen, and trying to, have it, but at the same time, not rush it, because, exactly that you to understand the choices they're going to make, it really is that the calibration that they're all trying, they're all undergoing with each other of what do I, the hesitancies and uncertainties. And I think, with an audience who is also thinking about their own families or sibling relationships that
Oh yeah.
they have or have seen depicted, how this isn't that. And yeah, there's something about that. And I think, yeah, like that was with the doc, you work with what you capture. And the family was so generous to let us, and I always, I'm like, we're privileged witnesses here to this moment. Um, but then to adapt it in the writing, it was being able to lean into those moments and craft them in that sense of, yeah, I wanted the audience to be thinking different things, like the layeredness. And I think that's where, I'm really interested is it, it, you know, to sit and go deep. Um, but also keep it interesting and you're not, and and give them the chance to be funny because they, I think Indigenous people are hilarious. And even if they haven't been raised in it, that's what I always say, they're inherently funny, and whether they had the opportunity to be or not in their lives, they are, and they can do that with each other, and trying to have those moments too.
Yeah, there is that little, there are, I mean, there's more than one, but there are little moments where they catch each other laughing and they just sort of relax a bit more over the
Mhm.
course of it. And yeah, it's really something. I did want to ask though, is there anything that you didn't catch in the documentary or that you weren't able to include in the finished cut that you managed to work into Meadowlarks as part of the narrative? Was there like
Oh
a
yeah, I
moment or
mean,
an idea?
I think, you know, with the documentary, it we made the decision with the participants, with the family, that it was a portrait of the week, the portrait of this family in that week in the present tense.
Hmm.
And, whatever glimpses of the past wove in thoughts of what the future would be, but we didn't push into the past at all. Um, and so, that was really what I realized I wanted to do is take my own understanding of my own, because sometimes people are like, oh, which one of them is you? I'm like, none of them, but there's elements of my understanding of the experience in all of them, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah.
And so, I wanted to lean into that, like how does what happened to them in the past affect how they're being in this moment? And my question always was what's working and what's not working. What are the strategies they had to protect themselves? And Michael literally tells us that he had to have a strategy to protect himself, which is, I think, very commonly felt by people who've been through that experience and how isolated they've felt growing up and alone. And then how do you, yeah, what do you have to let go of to actually form this real bond? Because sometimes the things, our self-protective strategies are then become self-fulfilling prophecies, right? And people remain isolated. And I think that's what I wanted to capture is the danger is always there, that they won't have that connection and they'll go home and they'll still be isolated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you manage to, or at least my read on it is that it is ultimately hopeful that
Yeah.
they might not all respond at the same time, but they'll get there.
They'll get there. Yeah. And they all have a transformation of some kind, right? Like Michael's ability to actually have a real conversation with his daughter. And, that's, and always, we talked about that. I'm like, that's your coming of age scene. Like you're, you're still yourself. He's still got that sweetness and whatever, but he's taking that step, and, and I think, Gwen just keeps going, which I think is just that's how she, there's a doggedness to her too that actually now that I think of it is maybe not unconnected to to Reed Dolly. You just keep trudging, right? And Marianne, taking on being able to be comfortable taking on an Indigenous identity, and Connie just resting. Oh my goodness, just resting. That's why, when we like that scene at the end of her sitting was actually part of a different scene. And in the end, we were like, we don't need it. We just need to have these moments with the four of them that just tell us visually what they're doing. And we were giggling because we were like, and Carmen relaxes, or but Carmen and Connie,
There's some overlap. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But, yeah, no, I just, yeah, to Michael's casting, I think it will take some people by surprise. But I knew like he will take this role and make it beautiful, and he definitely did that, as did they all. I literally was just the moment first rehearsal sitting around the table with the four of them and going, oh my God, like how did I get here? From, where I was in 2010, sort of having this sense of maybe I'll make the leap to drama someday, see Winter's Bone, think, oh, I think I can do this. It took me a while, but now it's like there's other projects I want to do and explore that. But I think, yeah, there's still very much a sense of place that that sometimes people see as empty or ugly or stark. And I think, but there's more there than people realize. And I feel the same way, about the prairies. I grew up with like, oh, what is Saskatchewan? It's what you fly over, on your way from, but the land, there's so much there that is sometimes scary, but is also beautiful and fulfilling.
Yeah, and when you're part of it, you get to see it literally from the ground up, right? Like it's an immersion. And I mean, you kind of do stuff for the West Coast in Meadowlarks that Granik does for the Ozarks in Winter's Bone, just little snapshots of places. Banff is we see it as a tourist trap for the wealthy more often than not, or it's where industry conferences are held, but you find the gift shops, and then you get to kind of go behind the gift shop and find the entire economy that exists behind it, and the world that thrives. I mean, there is a horrible version of Meadowlarks where our characters get caught up in an adventure after 20 minutes, and I'm so glad you didn't do that. But
I lived in Banff after university for 4 months, lived in a little one-room cabin that didn't have a bathroom, and I got exploited working in a student, like it was 21 years old, but you see the different layers of a place. And I think that I grew up on a farm, and I grew up with a grandpa who taught us how to observe and how to see and how to be still and wait and have that patience. And I think that's the other reason the patience within the filmmaking really struck me. But still saying something really profound and interesting. I think sometimes, especially now, the pace of things is so fast, and I always think, what are we missing in our rushing about?
Oh, everything. I'm pretty sure.
Mm-hmm.
My thanks to Tasha Hubbard, whose new drama Meadowlarks opens across Canada this Friday, November 28th, with opening night Q&As at select screenings across the country. Check the movie's Instagram page, Meadowlarks Movie, for specifics. And you can find Birth of a Family streaming free at nfb.ca too. Thanks also to Bonnie Smith. She knows what she did. You can find Tasha on Instagram at tasha.alaine, that's ALAINE, and you can find Winter's Bone on Blu-ray and DVD from Lionsgate Home Entertainment. It's also streaming on CTV in Canada and on Plex and the Moviesphere Plus Amazon channel in the US, and available to rent or buy on various VOD services across North America. You can find me on Blue Sky at Norm Wilner, and you can find this podcast there at Semcast, SEMcast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. The first year of the show is still available for just $20 at payhub.com/semcast. That's the first 52 episodes of Someone Else's Movie, 41 of which aren't currently available anywhere else. And check out my newsletter, Shiny Things, at shiny-things.ghost.io. I think you'll enjoy it. Our theme song is by The Last Year. If you like it or the show in general, please say so. Leave a review wherever you've been listening. Every little bit helps, it truly does. And check out the other shows on the Frequency Podcast Network while you're doing that. Stay safe, watch movies, get all the boosters. I'll see you next week.